A palette knife can be a scary looking tool, but it can create some beautiful shapes and add really interesting textures to our paintings. In today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the techniques that I use in my paintings, and hopefully this will inspire you to get acquainted with your palette knife. Firstly, I would like to say a huge thank you to Arteza for sending me today's supplies and for sponsoring today's video. Today I'll be using the premium acrylic set of paints, which has 60 beautiful colours that I'm really excited to get stuck into. The links to all the products used today and to the reference photo can be found in the description box. And Arteza have been kind enough to give myself and you lovely viewers a coupon for 10% off. So getting into today's video, I'll be demonstrating a complete painting, but first, let's get into some of my favourite techniques that the palette knife offers. Okay, so for this I'm using an Arteza acrylic pad. The paper has got a lovely texture to it and it's really thick, so you can pile on the paint and it won't warp or anything like that. Today I'll be using two different sized palette knife, a bigger one and a smaller one with a very pointy end. You may also want some kitchen roll just to wipe off any excess paint that we have. So first of all, I'm going to show you guys some techniques that I use regularly and really can give texture to your work. The first one is similar to a scumbling method and is really great when you want to pick up the texture of the canvas or the paint underneath. So to do that on the flat edge, I'm just going to get a little bit of paint like this. And I'm going to go round in a circular motion. You can see there that in the middle it's a very strong colour, but as you blend it out it picks up the really gorgeous texture of the paper and shows that pattern through. So this also works really well with canvas as well. Another way you can do this is to, as before, get it on the bottom of your palette knife and you can also scrape it away. And that, again, it's sort of a very blocky line, but it also just picks it up as it comes across. So both of these techniques are really good for some texture. Okay, so the next technique is going to be adding lines or detail. So this time I'm going to use the side of my palette knife to pick up paint. So really we only want to get it on the side, so we can just sort of drag it across the paint. And then we're going to put this side perpendicular to the paper and draw a line across. Oh, that was very wonky. Let me try that again. We can draw a line going across like that. And I use this technique for maybe when I'm painting waves or the horizon line to something. Another way that you can use lines with the palette knife is to get some quite thick blob of paint and paste it on so it's very thick. Then again, either using the tip or the side, you can draw lines through it. So this is great for line work and detail. So the next thing I'm going to show you is a really nice way to blend two colours, and that is to get one colour on your palette knife, then wipe your palette knife off, then take another colour and put that next to it. Then what we're going to do is take the bottom of the palette knife and drag that across the two colours, so you can see that you've got both different colours there in different sections. And then we're going to take that and drag that down. Now you can either leave it like this, or if you keep going down, that blend is going to get softer and softer. Or a different way, if you didn't want to do it on your palette, you could do the same thing on the actual canvas. So if you take a blob of colour and put another blob next to it like so, then again you can just use a downward motion and those colours will also blend together on the canvas. So that's completely up to you which one of those you prefer. I think doing it on the palette does give you a bit more control but this one will give you maybe different results that are a bit more surprising. So that's completely up to you. I am going to have just a little practice at creating a rose. I'm going to take the orange red and I'm just going to start pasting in that centre. As I say, this is going to be a very, very quick sketch. I'm not going to get too worried about it. And then I'm going to take my light apricot and I'm going to blend those shadows out using that. Something to remember when you are using a palette knife is that you do go through a lot of paint, because obviously you're pasting it on very thickly, which is great for texture. It gives it such a beautiful texture, but it does use a lot of paint. So I'm sort of pasting it on, but I'm also using the tip of my palette knife to draw lines into it. So then I'm going to take my white and start bringing that around the edge. And I definitely think flowers and roses are one of the easier things to paint with a palette knife, because the way the palette knife applies the paint is very sort of petal-like in itself. And then I'm just going to use a bit of the Vandyke brown mixed with some of the orange. And use that just to add a few little lowlights. I don't want to add too much there. Okay, so now I've just had a quick little play around with it. I'm going to now go and start onto the bigger canvas, as I like the way these colours are working together. Arteza have a lot of beautiful colours, and one of those is light apricot, which is what we're using today, and it's such a beautiful colour, so I'm really excited about using that in our work today. So let's go and get cracking with the big canvas. Okay, so I've got my paints here, I've got my water just down here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just tone the canvas slightly so that it's not so bright white. So doing that, I'm going to take a brush. This is a Royal Langnickel Imia Bright size 12, so it's quite a big brush. I'm just going to damp it in some water and dab that off. And I'm just going to take some of the Vandyke brown and just adding a fair bit of water. I'm just going to tone the canvas. Okay, so that's just going to stop it from being so bright white, so I'm going to let that dry, which shouldn't take too long. Okay, so this is a photo that I downloaded from pexels.com. I'll pop the link in the description box, and I thought the colours were really, really beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this down into a square. so that I can see how it's going to be placed on the canvas. So then I'm just going to pop that to one side so I can use that in my painting. Okay, so I'm going to start mapping out the painting now. So my paintbrush is a Winsor & Newton Winton Short Flat Bright in size 8, but you can literally use any paintbrush for this stage. It really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to wet that paintbrush just a little bit. And just using my Vandyke brown again, I'm going to map out where I want the flower. Okay, so that's absolutely great for now. So, putting on our first proper bit of paint then. So I'm going to take some of the light apricot, taking it on the tip of my palette knife, and I'm just almost like carving out the petals. Basically, I'm just using this to sort of help me imagine the flower and adding a bit of shape. How I find it easiest to hold it is if I hold it like this and then put my thumb on the neck, and that way you can really guide it around. I'm going to take some of the orange red, quite a bit on the edge of my palette knife, and I'm just going to start popping in some of those darker areas in the rose. So you can see if you have a lot of paint on the end and you place it on, it will be very like opaque and cover a lot of area. Or if you don't have much paint on, just a bit, and then you can drag it along and this will create this sort of shadow feeling. Okay, next I'm going to take some of the light apricot again. I think basically we're going to be mostly using these colours for now, and then we'll go in with some other colours in a bit. So I'm kind of blending them together on the canvas here. That's great, so we're going to start adding some lighter colours now. So I'm going to take some of the white and pop that down here. And I already had some orange on my palette knife, so I'm just going to mix that in. I'm just going to take that around the edge of the rose and just slowly build up the petals. Going back in with the white, sort of blending that with what we already have on the palette, and it's making this really nice blend of, I think it's the orange red because it's slightly more pinky than this colour here. But yeah, I'm just going to use this to draw in the petals. And what I love about palette knife paintings is that it's all about the texture that builds up. So each mark we make here will eventually show through. Even if we paint on top of what we're doing right now, it will show up in some form, whether it's texture or colour. So after I paste some on, you can kind of go back over it and carve, using the tip of your palette knife, you sort of carve into the paint. And again, that's going to add even more amazing texture. So I think using a palette knife is pretty hard, really, because not only is it still drawing and painting mixed together, but it's drawing with a very difficult tool. So, you know, please don't worry if it's not going how you want it to go. Unfortunately, that is part of the experience when learning to paint with a palette knife. It took me a very long time to finally become happy with what I was painting. So please be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up about it, because the biggest thing that is important right now is that you are having fun. And when you start telling yourself that you're rubbish, that is not fun. So create a nice environment for yourself. So here I'm just basically using a mixture of white, light apricot and a bit of orange red. It's very difficult to explain when it feels like a natural thing to do, but I'm really just keep looking backwards at my reference photo, and it's at this point it's more about getting the shapes than it is the colours. Okay, so I think that's it for sort of like the first basic layer. I'm going to wipe off my palette knife. And I think basically if we wait for this, you don't need to wait for it to fully dry, but if we can wait just for it to get a little bit of a base dry going on. So whilst that's happening, we can actually start working on the other little flowers. So I'm going to take some of the orange red again, and just like we did there, I'm going to start with the base or the centre. Then taking the light apricot, I'm just going to blend that up. Then taking just a dash of white, I'm just going to add that on the side. Okay, and I'm going to do another little one here, just a tiny little rosebud. I think working with a palette knife as well is a very personal thing. You know, what works for me might work differently for somebody else. It can be with the way the muscles are in your hand, or the way you write, or anything like that. It's all unique to you, so find something that works for you and don't worry about what I'm doing. Let's just paint together. Okay, so while that bit's drying, we can move on to the leaf and put down the first layer on that. Yeah, so I'm going to take some of the Mars orange, and I'm going to take some of the Vandyke brown and just mix that together so it's sort of like a light brown, you'd say. And then I'm just going to draw in the little, I don't know what you call it, I suppose the stem. So at this point I'm just getting it on the side and the tip of my palette knife and just drawing it down using that. And I've already added a faint line so I can see whereabouts I sort of want it to go. And you can see in the picture it sort of meets with another stem here. And then we can add on these little buds. And this bit is almost like drawing basically, but with paint. And although it's incredibly hard, I think this sort of part of it, if you persist and go just slowly and carefully, I think the effect is really, really nice. So it sort of is wobbly and a little bit edgy, but that's exactly what I like about it. Okay, at this point you don't have to be perfect as well, we're just doing a basic outline. Okay, so I'm going to take that mixture again, which is the Mars Orange and the Vandyke Brown, but I'm just going to add a bit of white to that. Which is going to give me like this creamy brown colour. And I'm going to use that for the leaves coming off of these buds right here. It's very similar colour to the background actually. But we're going to change the background so these will stick out better. And I'm going to use that as well just to add a little bit of detail on these buds. Okay, and then wipe off your palette knife. So next I'm going to add the leaves so we can see where those go. So I've got my greens up here. First of all, I'm going to take an olive green and sort of draw out where the leaves are going to go. Now I think palette knives are really, really nice for drawing leaves because I don't know what it is. I suppose it's sort of a leaf shape, the palette knife itself, but it really lends itself to drawing leaves. So I'm just doing it in one colour to begin with, and then once this layer is dry we can go over it and add some details in other colours. I'm just going to pop this leaf here for now, but we can put that over the top later because I don't want these colours to mix together too much. Okay, and I'm just going to use this green a little bit under these flowers too. I'm going to pop a little bit of green on the buds, just a splodge, and then wipe off your palette knife. Okay, so I think what we could do with doing now is adding in the background because we don't want to do too much details when we haven't got the background in yet. So you can add whatever background you like, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to stick to the photograph and do something based off that, so feel free to join me, or you can do something different, that's completely up to you. You may need a lot more paint than this for the background, obviously. You can choose whether you use a palette knife or a paintbrush. So definitely a paintbrush is more economical if you want to stretch your paint more. So I'm going to start with a paintbrush and then maybe going with some details with the palette knife. So I'm going to start with the bigger brush again, which was the size 12. And using a mixture of the greens and all these colours here, I'm going to start just to put in a background. So first of all, I'm going to start with the olive green, mix in a bit of the, what's that other green called? The Chromium Oxide green and the sap green, and just going to take those very loosely on my paintbrush. And actually I'm going to add in a little bit of brown to them. And I'm just going to very loosely create some petals using the shape of my brush. Sorry, not petals. I'm just going to loosely create some leaves with my paintbrush for the background. And I'm going to be slightly abstract here. And then Flipping between the Vandyke brown and the Paynes grey, I'm going to add some darker areas in. And although this does look very dark, that's because it is going to add some really nice contrast to the flower. I'm also going to add a little bit of the raw sienna in, because that gives it sort of like a gold edge, and that's also a really nice colour to use here. Also, I'm adding a little bit of white to some of the greens so that they're not too dark. I'm going to keep most of the darker colours around the flower. Okay, so then give your brush a really good rinse out. Okay, so now the definition has sort of gone here from this area, but that's okay because we just did it as a map before anyway. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to take some of the Mars orange and some of this raw sienna and mix those together. And using the tip of my palette knife, I'm going to retrace over the rosebud. And it may have felt like when we were painting over it that we were undoing our work, but actually as you put it on, you'll see that bits of the underneath layer still shine through. So then I'm going to take some of the raw sienna and I'm going to add into some of the leaves areas of this that is quite thick with paint, so it's sort of blending in. So I'm going to take some of the olive green and I'm going to add just a little bit of white. And I'm going to add some raw sienna into that as well. Okay, so I'm not going to mix it fully because I quite like the blend of all these different colours, but I'm going to use this in my leaf and I'm just going to redraw that shape of the leaf again using the tip, and then for the bigger areas using the side of my palette knife. so when you feel like you've got a nice shape, you can go in directly with the colours and blend those in more. And then I'm going to add this leaf. And then I'm going to use that same mixture and I'm just going to very slightly go along the stem. And then the buds. So as you can see, it's just all about building up all the layers. Okay, so now we've done the basic sort of background and stuff, we're going to go back into the flower right now. So I'm going to take some Vandyke brown just on the tip and very, very lightly, because we don't want much brown going into the flower, I'm just going to add a little few hints of shadows. Then going over the top of these, I'm going to take my orange red and again use that for the shadow. Just some little areas, I'm going to take that around the edge where you can see some areas of that darker orange. Okay, lovely. So next I'm going to take my Mars Black, and this is going to be more of the shadow. Did I say Mars Black? I mean Mars Orange, sorry. And I'm also going to just take that into the bottom of that bud. Okay, so wipe off your palette knife. Next I'm going to start adding some of these. So I'm going to take the orange yellow and I'm going to add quite big thick sections of that into the middle again. And this is just going to add a different hue, a different sort of colour. Next I'm going to take the Indian yellow, which is this gorgeous, oh it's just beautiful, I just love this colour. We're going to use this fairly sparingly, but I just wanted to add a few of these brighter yellowy areas in the middle again and just around the outside. Okay, I think just a few hints is enough for that. Wipe off your palette knife. Then we're going to be going in mostly with the light apricot, so again, we might need a lot on our palette here. I'm just going to use this to carve into what we've done. And using all the techniques that we looked at earlier. I'm blending, I'm drawing lines in it. And as you see the flowers start to emerge, it does make you realise how much of the underneath layers we've used, even though it feels like we're painting on top of them. Okay, so then I'm going to mix a bit of the orange red in with a bit of apricot. And then I'm going to use this just around the edge to add in some darker areas. Now we're going to wait for that to not completely dry, but just to get a bit tacky. Okay, so next we're going to be adding the final highlights with the white. So I'm going to take the white on the edge of my palette knife and I'm going to draw in, or scrape in even, some areas. Or if you want to just add a completely white highlight, take quite a lot of paint and just very lightly take it across. Okay, so I'm really happy with the way the main flowers turned out. I think I'm going to leave it like that for now. I may add some more later, but for now I'm happy with it. Okay, so now I'm going to work on these two buds here. So we want to take the orange red again and add that into the bottom. And then taking the light apricot. Then taking the white, I'm going to add in the highlights. So it's very much a similar process, but just basically just going backwards and forwards between the colours. And then taking the white, I'm just going to add that highlight there. Okay, so then I'm going to do the same with the smaller buds, so taking the orange, I'm just going to add that in the middle. I mean, this doesn't need much paint, so you can keep this one very, very simple by just using the 3 colours. And I think at this point I'm going to use my palette knife to add in some more of the background. So I'm going to use the same techniques to add like colour and interest. So taking the Paynes grey, I'm going to take that along the bottom of my palette knife, place it perpendicular to the canvas, and then I'm going to move around in a circular motion. And next, taking the brown, I'm going to do the same. So I'm not doing anything particularly, I'm not thinking too much about it. I'm just adding in paint to create some more depth. So again, taking that Paynes grey and the brown, I'm just going to take that into the flower. And you can even like carve into the petals to create more of a shape with the petals. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is the same with the greens. So I'm going to add in some leaves. So mix in some of the olive green with some brown and also the chromium oxide, just a mixture of all of it together. I'm going to start adding in kind of like an abstract background with the leaves. So this is basically just going on top of what we did with the paintbrush. Just use your palette knife to create different shapes and just have a bit of a play around with it. I'm not even looking at my reference photo here, I'm just using the paint to carve shapes around. And this is the technique that I use in all of my floral paintings that have that abstract edge that you can tell that have been made with a palette knife. This is exactly what I do. I definitely feel like we need to work on the leaves a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to use my smaller palette knife, which has a real sharp edge. So I'm going to add the stem again. So I'm using a mixture of Mars orange with a bit of raw sienna and white. And I know we've done the stem, but this is going to give it a bit of, say, illuminance and make it stand out more, because it's going into the background a little bit at the moment. So I'm just going to use my palette knife in exactly the same way, put it down the side of the palette knife, and then sort of draw along with it. Okay, and then I'm going to use that same colour to once again add in the sort of leaves that come under these buds. Okay, so next I'm going to add some more luminance to the leaves as well. So I'm going to take some of the olive green and I'm going to add in some of the raw sienna and also some white. Okay, and then I'm going to use that to, again, carve in where the petals are. And this is where you can use the real sharp edge on the palette knife, because you can add that real, jagged edge feeling. I'm going to use this colour for the centre of this rosebud here. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of Indian yellow into that mixture, which is going to give it this lovely like greeny gold feel. And I'm going to use that in little hints in the leaves. So taking some of the white and adding it into any of those mixtures that we've got, I'm just going to use a fairly light colour to add some highlights onto the leaves. So as I say, it doesn't necessarily matter what colour it is or what colour you're using, as long as it's some of those greens. Okay, so then wipe off your palette knife, and to define some of those leaves, I'm going to take the Paynes grey and I'm going to sort of like trace around them to just define their shape. And because palette knives can be quite hard to control, this is a great way of like redefining shapes that you don't like. So I'm also going to use a mixture of these techniques that we've just done for the leaves to add in some more leaves around the edges, to make us feel like we're in a rose bush. So taking a bit of the brown, I'm just going to add that into the bud. Something that is bugging me is this bud here for some reason, so I'm just going to have a little play around with that. Yeah, I'm much happier with that. Sometimes you just see something that you just don't like. Also, as like a finishing off, I'm just going to add in a darker green line around this, around the edge of that petal, sorry, leaf, along the edge of that leaf. Oh, I almost forgot. There is one little thing I wanted to add, and that is the beautiful, beautiful gold. So this is the colour Pearl Copper Gold in the Arteza Premium Acrylic Colour section, and it is absolutely stunning. I've used many different golds with acrylic paints and I find it really, really difficult to find a gold I like, but this gold is beautiful, just absolutely stunning. So I'm going to add some little hints of this beautiful gold on the painting, just so that they catch the light, and it's going to be so beautiful. I'm going to go in first with the leaves. Like, seriously, I cannot get over how gorgeous this gold is. And I think I'm going to have to add some into the flower. I wasn't going to plan to, but it's too pretty not to. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that, so it's just hints. In fact, actually, there's a leaf down here that it would look really nice with. So these Arteza colours actually held up really well with a palette knife, because some paints don't do so well with a palette knife if they're a bit too runny, but these paints have created a really stunning texture, and up close you can just see all the layers coming together, and it's really beautiful. So I definitely think that you guys should go and check out this brand of paints. I'll pop the link in the description box, and you should also find a coupon there too. So go and check those out. And yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. I thought it was really great fun, and it's the perfect way to celebrate spring coming, which I am so excited about. So have a beautiful day, have fun creating, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys!